In the Bhagawad Geeta, the primary yajna for deliverance, Krishna stresses on this, is Karma Yoga. But in the performance of Karma Yoga, there are many verses which are confusing. One of them is Prakriti Kriyamanani Gunai Karmani Sarvasha Ahankara Vimudatma Kartaham iti Manyate. That actions are performed by Prakriti, by matter, unconscious matter. And the foolish conscious living entity imagines he is the doer of the act. Karya Karanam Kartritve Hetur Prakriti Uchate Purusha Sukha Dukhanam Bhoktate. That Prakriti, unconscious matter, performs all the actions, but the conscious living entity imagines he is the doer of all actions. Therefore, he enjoys or he suffers. So, I thought I would share with you a presentation on the neuroscience and psychology of work. Essentially, it's about Karma Yoga, or it gives you the underpinnings of Karma Yoga in terms of the more scientific perspective. So, work fills most of our lives. At least 8 hours of the day are spent in working. And not only does work fill most of our lives, but also it defines us. People ask you, what do you do? What do you do? What is your profession? What is your job? What is the work that you do? So that also defines us. Work defines us. Work also gives our life meaning, and that I'm going to explain the science behind. So we'll see what is work. Why do we need to work? The psychology, the neuroscience, how to make work into meditation, and how we can become transformed through the performance of work. Some people like to say that work is hard labor. If you don't perspire, if you don't sweat, if you're not doing something with manual labor, then it's not work. So you have the workers of the nation unite, workers of the world unite. And this is the work that they mean. But in truth, work is not only about physical labor, work is also about thinking, deciding, executing. So people who don't necessarily do physical labor are also working. And in fact, you might find that they often experience far more stress than those who work physically. One way to define work is that we equate work with economic benefit. That's how an economist would look at it. You see it in terms of cash returns. So no work, no pay. And the reverse of that, of course, is no pay, no work. So work is equated with economic productivity, and economic productivity is equated to work. But what about the homemaker? Is that not economic activity? It is unpaid economic activity. To be a wife, to be a mother, to be a homemaker. Is that not work? So then what is work? We would define work as a transfer of energy. But I would like to define work as that effort which adds value to the world. As long as you are adding value to the world, you are working. And when you add value to the world, you discover a unique value within yourself. The Bhagawad Geeta says, when you are adding value to the world, don't look for value from the world. But instead, when you add value to the world, look for value within yourself. So why do we work? We work for meeting needs outside the workplace. We work to maintain a lifestyle and a standard of living. We work to pursue our leisure interests. More important, we work to occupy the mind. When your mind is not occupied by work, the mind, as discussed in the previous sessions we have conducted, your mind can destroy you. So if you look at the brain, as I pointed out, there is a default mode circuit. And the default mode circuit which gets activated when you are not working is that circuit in the brain which creates thoughts about I, me, myself, my relationships with the world and other people, what will happen to me in the future, what happened to me in the past. So this default mode circuit strengthens, structures, repairs this virtual sense of self, which is an illusion and exists only inside your mind. And this is the cause of suffering. Because there is now, as I pointed out, neuroscientifically, we have two prominent networks that are important. One is the default mode network. It's also known as the social cognition network. This is the monkey brain. This is the brain that never stops working. This is your mind. This is your mind on crack. This is your mind which is eating you up. This is the mind which is the cause of all suffering. This is the mind that you can't turn off. This is called default mode circuit. It's also known as the social cognition mode. The other mode that you have is known as the task positive mode. While default mode, social cognition mode are the task negative modes, or that's how the brain works when you are not working. When you are working in task positive mode, you get relief from suffering. So very often people think that when they are bereaved, when they lose a loved one, when there are unfortunate things happening in their lives, They should, sit at home and do nothing. That aggravates your suffering and makes it worse. But if you work or you go to work and you apply yourself to work, adding value to the world, in the midst of your pain and your suffering, you will find relief. In fact, unemployment increases law breaking. If you see, the degree of unemployment will also lead to an increase in crime. Unemployment also breeds terrorism, as we have seen here in Mumbai city, where unemployed youth were trained, harnessed to create violence and were set loose on Bombay city. This is all the result of a mind that is otherwise unemployed, and someone employs that mind to create evil. We also work for our self-esteem, because when you do not work, what happens to you? You rapidly disintegrate, because, as I said, your work defines you. So alcoholism, drugs, all these are a result of trying to escape from the task negative network, to escape from the mind that causes suffering, to escape from the social cognition mode which is causing torture and suffering. Work gives you relief from all of that. And of course, work can eventually lead to self-actualization, because you believe you are fulfilling the purpose of your creation. You're expressing the core competencies and abilities that God has given you. You see the blossoming of creativity and the experience of what we will now explain as flow. So what is the psychology of work? Abraham Maslow was a psychotherapist who decided, instead of treating one patient at a time, he decided, why don't I treat whole masses of people at a time, large groups of people at a time? And he found that to be through work. He believed that when basic needs are met, when food, drink, air, protection, security, law and order, your emotional needs are met, when your responsibility, then you move towards self-actualization, your personal growth and your fulfillment. And this is best realized through the expression of your working abilities, something which the Bhagawad Geeta talks of as Swadharma, or your dharma, the purpose for your creation. So this physical body, this mind, this intelligence was created for a purpose. And when all your other needs are met, when you express the purpose for which you were created, you have self-actualization. And indeed, it's only when you flower, when you blossom, when you bloom, when your phoenix arises from its ashes. And as Maslow said, therapy is the search for value. Everybody is looking for value. And when they add value to the world, they discover a unique value within themselves. And that leads to self-actualization, self-realization. It leads to fulfillment. It leads to individuals functioning at their best. And even while they function at their best in the performance of their duty, internally they are situated on a transcendental platform. I advise all of you to read Maslow's Business Reader. And in Maslow's Business Reader, he gives several descriptions of a person who self-actualized. And if you are studying the Bhagavad Gita, you will find that these descriptions of the self-realized person, the Sthita Prajna, the Gunatita, the Karma Yogi, the Bhakta, all these you will find, the Dhyan Yogi, all of these you will find, Gyan Yogi, all of these, their state is similar to that which Maslow describes as the self-actualized person. So let us understand how neuroscience functions at work. We have a conscious mind, which I call it the false ego. You may call it the ego. It is also, shall we say, the virtual creation of the task negative network. And then you have the unconscious mind. And between them, you have the preconscious mind. Preconscious mind can become conscious. The unconscious mind is very difficult to deal with. And Freud explained that in consciousness and the brain, the unconscious mind is the more important of the two. And this unconscious mind, which we call Prakriti, Bhumi apo nalo vayur kham mano buddhi revacha ahankara ityam me bhinna prakriti ashtada. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego, they are all parts of my inferior energy, that is Prakriti. But you are not Prakriti, you are the soul. Aparayam itastvanyam prakritim vidime param jiva bhuta mahabhaoya yedam karyate jagat. So Benjamin Libet was a neuroscientist who worked with very primitive equipment in the 70s, 1970s. And he used an oscilloscope to determine when the brain would give out a signal that it is going to act. And also he used the subject's indicator as to when exactly the subject had decided to act. He found something amazing. And what did he find that was amazing? He put a EMG on the muscles, electromyography. He used an EEG and he used an oscilloscope. And he told them that randomly at your will move your finger. And when you are about to move your finger, you note the number that you see that is working on that machine. And using this EEG and the EMG, he tried to find out whether the decision to move the finger and the electrical activity in the brain and the muscle took place, how long would it take place after the decision? And he was shocked to discover that the brain decides before you do. That is, the unconscious brain decides to act before you do. When you are planning to reach for that piece of chocolate cake, Your brain has already decided that it is going to pick up that slice of chocolate cake. Even while your conscious mind is debating, oh, I shouldn't take it. Oh, it's not good for me. It's not healthy. But the brain has decided. And that decision which the brain takes occurs before you consciously decide to reach for that chocolate cake. And in doing so, now more modern techniques have been used in neuroimaging because we have functional MRI. And we have discovered what Libet considered, that the brain started making the decision or made the decision in milliseconds, 7 milliseconds before you made the decision, using functional MRIs and other radio imaging techniques. We now realize that the brain decides to do something 6 to 8 seconds before you decide consciously to do something. Imagine the dead matter of your brain, the prakriti. Of course, it is enlivened, it has life, but it is not under your conscious control. And this piece of meat that lies between your ears takes the decision for you. And then you consciously take a decision and you think that you made the decision. But in actual fact, the decision was made by Prakriti. So the question comes, do we have free will? And the answer is, in fact, we really don't have free will, because most of our actions are predicated, are preceded by the brain making decisions for you based upon previous patterns. What is the mind? The mind, as described by Edward de Bono, is a pattern-seeking, self-organizing system. So to learn something, you keep looking at something, studying something, and then you say, aha, it is just like that. Means you're comparing it with some pattern in the past. So also, your unconscious mind makes decisions for you, not your conscious mind. And then it communicates with the rest of the brain so that the conscious mind then thinks it has made the decision by itself. But you have one advantage, that in those 8 seconds between the brain deciding that it will do something and in fact you deciding that you will do something, there is a won't power. You don't really have a will power, but you have a won't power. And that won't power, in those 8 seconds, you can decide to stop an action, though the willing of the action is done by dead matter. So, you can't say that everything is done by my brain, I can't help it. But it's true, alcohol, heroin, work, sex, spending, cocaine, gambling, all of these are run by the unconscious mind, by dead matter, by Prakriti, by the programming that you have given your mind in the past. Your subtle body has its own programming, and this subtle body functions through the mind, which is a pattern-seeking, self-organizing system. But while you are driven towards that drink, you're driven towards that drug, you're driven towards that cigarette, you have 8 seconds before you light up that cigarette. You have 8 seconds before you pour that drink or raise it to your lips. You have 8 seconds before you snort that cocaine. And those 8 seconds are there for you to say, no, I won't. So it's important to understand that while we may not have a willpower because our unconscious mind, Prakriti is doing everything, we have a own power. Mamaivaso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manashastendriyani prakritistani karshati. You are but a fragment of me, Krishna says, and you are struggling with your mind and your 5 senses. So indeed, we struggle against ourselves or against our Prakriti. And while we struggle against our Prakriti, Krishna says, sometimes that struggle, or rather, this struggle is largely destined to fail. Why is it destined to fail? Because Krishna says that his Prakriti, this Prakriti is functioning under my direction. And, Daivi esa gunamayi mama maya duratyaya mameva ye prapadyante mayam etam taranti. Prakriti is my divine energy. You cannot overcome it. But it says, Krishna says, if you surrender unto me, then you can cross beyond it. It's not a secret. But if you look at Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, all of them are based upon surrender to God. The 12-step process depends on God. And even atheists are told that you have to accept God if you want these 12 steps to function so that you can become free of your addiction. So this is explained in the Bhagawad Geeta that Prakriti is very difficult to overcome because it is empowered by God. But if you appeal to God, then God helps you to transcend Prakriti. So we often feel that we have an illusion of free will. But in fact, we have no free will. We function as we've always done in the past. We function as we have programmed our unconscious. We function as we have carried sanskaras, as we have carried vasanas, as we have carried our karmas from the past, including past lives. It's like the mahout and the elephant. The mahout is sitting on the elephant and he's guiding it on the way home. He thinks he is guiding the elephant, but in actual fact, it is the elephant that knows the way home. And if the elephant refuses to listen to the mahout is forced to obey the elephant. So that elephant is your prakriti, it's your unconscious mind. And you, your sense of self, is nothing other than the mahout seated on top of this unconscious mind. So, volition, that means the decision to act, and action are functions of the unconscious mind that performs perfectly in the correct environment with the right stimulus. So whether it is, Zero Dark 30, where SEAL Team 6 went to kill Osama bin Laden, they repeated the entry, they repeated the landing, they repeated everything multiple times in their training ground until all the actions that they were going to do were deeply implanted in their unconscious. And then when they landed in that compound to kill Osama bin Laden, their unconscious mind helped them to perform perfectly in that environment. You have to practice again and again and again and again. Just like a tennis player keeps practicing and practicing and practicing until that particular stroke becomes perfect. Just like a boy studying for the IIT entrance exam must practice and practice and practice, because this practice indeed programs the unconscious mind. And the unconscious mind performs actions according to the sanskaras and the karmas of the past. So how do you perform action, or how do you perfect action? First, there is unconscious incompetence. There is a 2-year-old child who's sitting on the father's lap and driving the car, turning the steering wheel. And when you ask that child, he says, yes, I'm driving. He is incompetent to drive, but he's unconscious of that ability. When that child is now 6, 7 years old, he realizes he can't even look beyond the steering wheel. His feet don't touch the pedals. So he knows and he is conscious of his incompetence in driving. Third, this girl is now an 18-year-old girl with a driving license, learner's license, with the teacher sitting next to her, and the father is sitting in the back, and she's changing gears and turning the steering wheel. And when the father talks to her from the back seat, she says, don't talk to me, can't you see that I'm driving? She is conscious of her competence, but it is conscious competence. She's fully, entirely engaged in the driving. She can't do anything else because the conscious mind is engaged on the action. Then you have unconscious competence. Now she's 21 years old. She is driving with one hand. The other hand is hanging outside the window, which she is waving outside the window to dry her fingernails, which she has just painted. She is drinking coffee from a glass through a straw, and also occasionally taking a bite from a burger that she is eating. And yet, sometimes operating the steering wheel with the elbow, sometimes with the free hand, she is zipping through the traffic while she's talking on the mobile phone with her boyfriend. That is called unconscious competence. So this, we go through all these are phases of learning. And finally, when you reach unconscious competence, then you can perform that action in perfection. So in Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, the science of instinct versus logic, we think fast most of the time because we are thinking through the reflexes that we have developed through the patterns of thought, speech, and behavior that we have cultivated and ingrained in the unconscious. And only rarely, uncommonly, do we act through conscious thought and logic. So in fact, whether you're a surgeon by profession, whether you are a sports person, whatever you're doing, you have to keep doing it again and again and again until your unconscious is programmed. And when the unconscious is programmed, your activity becomes almost like a habit. You are able to perform activities based on experience. That's why people who pass from professional colleges or from management colleges or engineering colleges or medical colleges actually have only theoretical knowledge, and they are not worth much even in the marketplace. But when they acquire experience, that experience makes them valuable. And that is the result of having created habits of thought, speech, and behavior. So if you want to learn, you should learn how to work expertly. And this has been analyzed by Malcolm Gladwell in his book, The Outliers. And in his book, The Outliers, he explains how the Beatles were in fact such a lousy band that they could not get a gig in any of their home nightclubs or places to perform. In none of the Liverpool clubs they would get a place to play because they were so lousy. But then they went to Hamburg and they took a job which required them to play almost 17, 18 hours of the day with short 5-10 minute breaks to eat something or drink something or visit the restroom. And when they did this over a period of 3 or more years, when they crossed the 10,000 hour rule, that is, they played continuously and their unconscious was programmed over 10,000 hours, they became the most phenomenal band that has ever been. And so that's how they became the Beatles, through constant practice. So also, whatever you do, if you want to become expert at it, remember you have to have the 10,000 hour rule. When you teach skills at the conscious level, you're just beginning. It's when you have practice and experience of 10,000 hours that you can gain true mastery over the work that you are doing. And in fact, another important psychological fact, also from Maslow, is the secret of flow. Mihail Csikszentmihalyi wrote this wonderful book on flow, Psychology of Optimal Experience. And here he pointed out that you must do that work which is optimal for you. You do work where you have high skills and low challenges, you will be bored. If you do work which is high challenges and you have low skills, you are in anxiety. But when your work and your abilities fine-tuned to match each other, then you have optimal flow. And in this optimal flow, you attain a phenomenal state of being. You attain pure consciousness. This is the flow of pure consciousness when divinity acts through you. These are the qualities that are required to bring out flow. Challenging activity that requires skills, you must have a clear goal and feedback. You must be completely absorbed in the work so that you're completely unconscious of everything else that is going on. In fact, not only are you unaware of your hunger and thirst, you're also unaware of your bodily appetites or needs. And you are unconscious of time as well. You must have experienced this so many times in your life, that you're really loving the work that you're doing You've forgotten about everyone else. You've forgotten about everything else. And in fact, you've forgotten about time. And you look at your watch and say, oh, how much time has passed? This is because you are in a state of flow. And this is what we call as a task positive network. This task positive network is the mind in meditation. It is when your work has become a meditative act. And indeed, imagine if you could do this for 8 hours of the day. So when you are working, you be in a state of flow or meditation. And when you are not working, you chant the holy name, which again puts you into what we call as a task positive network, so that you remain in meditation and your life becomes a continuous meditation on God. So that work in which you can find flow is known as your swadharma. And if you can perform your swadharma in a spirit of sacrifice to the all-pervading Lord, you will find perfection. Yataha pravrittir bhutanam yena sarvam idam tatam swakarmana abhyarchaya siddhim ninditi manavaha. So you find through trial and error, sometimes getting it right, sometimes getting it wrong, but eventually you will find that swadharma where you are perfectly good. And that is where you should try to remain. So they have done SPECT images both during meditation, and they've also done other neuroimaging techniques or radio imaging techniques, whereby they've discovered that while you are in flow, the activity in your brain is identical to that state when you are in deep meditation. So I discussed with you in the last session about meditation, but there is no work that is superior, there's no meditation that is superior to work, because through work you add value to the world. Imagine, you are not being selfishly salvation centric. This is the mistake that many spiritual seekers make, trying to be selfishly salvation centric. When you are performing work which is adding value to the world and you are simultaneously meditating in flow, then the world also benefits, you also benefit. This is the function and the purpose of the Bhagawad Geeta. The Bhagavad Gita was talking to people faced with a choice between abandoning the world and those who were working in the world, aspiring and trying to get things in the world. Krishna explained to them that the entire purpose of work is to make it into a meditation. And if you can make it into a meditation by offering all actions to God, you will find peace, perfection, and the supreme destination. Yat karoshi yad ashnasi yat juhosi dadasi yat tapasyasi kaunteya tat purushvam adarpanam. Shubha shubha falairevam mokshati karma bandhane. Sannyasa yoga yuktena vimukto mameva. Said very clearly that if you do everything for me, all task positive efforts are offered to the Lord. You are constantly in flow. You're constantly in meditation. You will become free from both good and bad karmas. And on this path of sannyas yoga, because you are living in the world and yet internally in sannyas, you will attain perfection and come back to God. So there are two types of work: exotelic work, where you work for rewards, recognition, prizes, money, etc. And there is autotelic work, where you enjoy the work so much that even when you're fired, you keep turning up for work. So, because the joy of autotelic work is the joy that you discover within yourself. It is that joy you discover within yourself which leads to your transformation. So there are two things. One is there is transactional work where lena dena, and then there is transformational work, which means that you are completely changed as a result of the work that you are engaged in. So many people think that yoga means that you keep twisting your body into positions which cannot be attained by others. But real yoga is doing that in a manner, in a spirit of devotion to God, and doing it mindfully so that you become internally transformed rather than only physically transformed. So thus yoga is transformational. And the position is less important than the transformation that occurs inside of you. Now, Krishna sees that Arjuna is approaching the Mahabharata battle in a transactional state of mind. Krishna says to Arjuna, why am I killing all these people or seeking to kill all these people for the sake of becoming a prince? How will that wealth which I acquire benefit me? And Krishna redirects Arjuna to perform his duty not as a transactional deed, but as a transformational deed. Because as you function and as you act, you will become internally transformed. So, friends, the Bhagavad Gita is about this. It's about making your work a transformational experience. That your work should become a meditation and a means for transformation. And spiritual transformation is the real purpose of work. So when you sit to chant or you sit to meditate in some other way, you are like tuning the instrument, your Prakriti. By you're tuning it to God so that God can communicate through you, so God can flow through you. But eventually you need to go out onto the stage and play that instrument for the entertainment of the masses. So also you may sit in japa and you may sit in meditation. But the real purpose is that you have to go out into the world, engage in work as flow, as an offering to God, in a spirit of devotion and renunciation, and you will find peace, perfection, and the supreme destination. So in all faiths, you find that work is spiritual discipline. And Maslow said that you must be true to your swadharma. You must do what your physical body, your mind, and your intelligence was created for. If you don't do that, you will always be unhappy. So there is no fixed recipe for you. You have to discover your own swadharma, where your abilities meet the challenges. And so what is important is that you do your duty, don't run away. Sannyasas karma yogascha nihashayasya karaubhau tayostu karma sannyasat karma yogo vishishyate. Between working in the world and with devotion and abandoning the world in sannyas, working in the world with devotion is by far superior. So do your swadharma. See that your skills and challenges are perfectly matched. Do appropriate and obligatory action. Don't try to do somebody else's duty because it seems to be more profitable. And your work will become the instrument of your salvation. So, by regularizing your life, tamaguna, which causes laziness and inactivity, and which uses your own power to avoid work, will be transcended. When you give up your obsession with the fruit, whatever you get paid, whatever you get rewarded, that obsession with the fruit will eventually become irrelevant. And let your work be autotelic. Engage in the work that you were created by your inner qualities and training to love and enjoy. I don't say that you should refuse what you're getting paid or your rewards, but let it not be your primary objective, but merely a welcome side effect, a prasad. So work hard and cheerfully, as if and so that you are working for the long run. Understand that you are not a doer. God is the doer who acts through Prakriti. Transcend the three gunas and become gunatita. Sattva guna leads to egoism and self-satisfaction. Your conscious mind has negligible role in your actions. All your actions are the result of your unconscious mind and programming. So if you are yet young, program your mind. And if you have reached that stage where you have programmed your mind, engage in performing activities in flow. Aldous Huxley, in his book, The Perennial Philosophy, described that there are many levels of prayer. The first is petition. Oh Lord, will you give me a Mercedes Benz? My friends all drive Porsches, I must make a man. You want something for yourself, so you're asking God. The second is intercession, where you're telling God to do something for someone else because you think God is sleeping on the job. Hey God, wake up, pay attention here. This guy is suffering, you don't know about it because you're not all knowing. So please do this for this person. This is my wife, this is my son, this is my friend, or this is somebody unknown to me. But I'm praying for you anyway. That's called intercession. Then you have contemplation, where you sit still, focus on God, forget yourself. That is contemplation. And lastly, there is adoration. When you work in the world, acting value to the world, adding value to the world, and this value that you add to the world, you offer in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion to God. Petition is praying for yourself. Intercession is calling to stand in the gap. Contemplation is praying to God. Just forget yourself and remember Him. But adoration, work is worship. And that is the supreme form of prayer. It's the highest form of prayer. So put your best in work, in prayer. In fact, as Saint Augustine has said, pray as though everything depends on God and work as though everything depends on you. So put your best in both work and in prayer. The ideal work transforms you and purifies you. By working in that spirit of devotion and renunciation, you will become free from pain and suffering. Dukheshu anudvigna mana sukheshu vigataspriya vita raga bhaya krodha sthitadi muni uchate. You will become free from suffering. You will become equanimous in joy and sorrow, honor and dishonor, heat and cold. You will have equal vision towards all beings. Vidya vinaya sampanne brahmana gavi hastini. Shuni chaiva sapake cha pandita samadarshana. You will see an elephant, a cow, a dog eater, a Brahman. See them all with equal vision. So make your work into a meditation. That indeed is Karma Yoga. And that is the central and most important message of the Bhagavad Gita. Through work, we add value to the world and discover unique value within ourselves. We work best through the unfettered unconscious. So silence the voice of ego consciousness. Program your unconscious for excellence with experience, focus, practice, practice, practice. And undertake tasks where your skills match your challenges and you find flow. Work is a transformational prayer to the divine. Become transformed and experience your divinity. Yataha pravrittir bhutanam yataram tam swakarmanam jaya siddhim niddhim. So, if you have any queries or questions, I think we have some 5 minutes or so.
Yes, of course, sir. Very good morning, and thanks for such a wonderful presentation, sir. And I will go with our first question. So, can we say that spirituality is a deeper science of mind, body, and soul, as it gives an understanding of
Understand your question.
So, can we say that spirituality is a deeper science of mind, body, and soul? I mean, it's not as
Spirituality goes beyond the mind and the body and the intelligence. It is the universal ground of all creation. And that is what we are. Aham Brahmasmi. We are all spirit.
Absolutely. So, what is the role of consistency in the 10,000 hour rule? Because usually we get distracted in our day to day lives.
Consistency comes with continuous practice. When you have done 10,000 hours, you will experience this.
Definitely. So, can we say, as you have already shown this in the previous slides, that being in autotelic work is a kind of meditation, and the work that which interests us, if we keep on doing that, so it's also a kind of meditation. We do not need to separately sit and close our eyes to be in that state.
In fact, everything that you do should be autotelic, because if you offer it to God, you remember God and forget the self, you will transform yourself and allow divinity to shine through.
Sure, sir. So, with that, moving to today's last question. So, how can we make balance in life in all aspects of our life, like relationships and work, private or personal life, considering mental health?
I didn't follow your question.
So, how can we make balance in our life, like in relationship, work,
So
private?
this is another ridiculous idea which has been created by modern, that you must have work-life balance. There's no question of balance. You have to be fully immersed in God. All your relationships have to be based on God. All your personal as well as your work relationships are offered in sacrifice to God. So there is no question of balance. They're all continuous flow of both of them. Your private life is but your public life, or your public life is rather your private life put large.
Because ultimately one affects the other. It's the one person who's performing different roles and different aspects. So
divinity has to pervade everything. Offering your actions to divinity pervades all.
So, sir, these were our questions for today, and thank you so much for such a wonderful session.
So, Hare Om, Jai Shri Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Jai Shri Krishna. Thank you.